Tiffany Ann Cole was born in 1981 in South Carolina. From early on, her life was fractured. She struggled with substance use and long spells of depression. Her father mistreated her. She witnessed cruelty at home, between people and toward animals. Still, she clung to what she could. She looked after her younger brothers. She cared for her father as his health declined. The family was broken, but not entirely absent. In her early 20s, she drifted from place to place. Trouble followed. She met a man named Michael Jackson, no relation to the singer. By June 2005, she found herself in Jacksonville, Florida. There, she stayed with Carol and Reggie Sumner, an older couple in their 60s. They had once lived near her father. Now they welcomed her with open arms. They trusted her, completely. Carol and Reggie sold their home. They made $99,000 from the sale. That money made them targets. Cole, Jackson, and two young men named Alan Wade and Bruce Nixon planned to take the money. They worked out a careful plan. 2 days before July 8th, they drove to a rural area in Georgia. They dug a 4-by-6-foot grave. Cole held a light as they worked. They waited until the night of July 8th, 2005. Wade and Nixon knocked on the Sumners' door with a made-up story. They tied the couple and covered their mouths. Jackson stayed outside. The young men used tape and cloth to keep the couple from seeing. They pretended to have a real weapon. They took the couple's bank cards, jewelry, and papers. They forced the couple into their own car trunk. They drove them to the grave site. The couple was buried in that hole. They could not breathe under the soil. Cole and Jackson followed behind in a Mazda. Cole was driving. At the site, the older pair shared their pins. They may have done this out of fear. The young men put them in the hole. They covered them with dirt. Nixon got back into the Mazda with Cole. Wade and Jackson filled in the grave. Then they all left. Jackson used the cards and withdrew over $1,000. Cole pretended to be Mrs. Sumner when she called the authorities. She made up a story about a funeral trip to another state, but pawn shop records and phone data led to their arrest in South Carolina. Nixon showed officers where the grave was. The medical exam showed the couple had been buried alive and lost their ability to breathe. At first, it seemed like a theft gone wrong, but the careful planning showed it was more than that. Why did Cole, someone the couple knew, join in? They wanted money. They also didn't want anyone to tell on them. Prosecutors said both reasons were key. In October 2007, a trial was held in Jacksonville. Nixon spoke against the others. Investigators shared taped talks, phone records, and photos of Cole celebrating with money and champagne. The jury found Cole guilty on charges that led to the couple losing their lives, holding them against their will, and taking their property by force. She faced the most severe punishment. In her own words, she said she only planned to steal. She said she bought tape and plastic wrap. She bought cleaner and gloves. She held the light while they dug. She drove the getaway car. She called the police and used the stolen cards, but the court saw she did more than help. The court found 7 factors that made the case worse. They noted she had a past conviction. She had held people against their will. There was cruel treatment. The plan was cold and deliberate. She wanted money. She tried to avoid being caught. Her victims were older and weak. On October 19, 2007, the jury voted 9-3 for the harshest punishment. A judge gave her that punishment for both losses of life. She also got life terms with no chance of release for the forced holds. She received an extra 15 years for taking property by force. Cole appealed. In 2010, the state's highest court kept her verdict and penalties. In 2016, a U.S. decision required full jury agreement before imposing the harshest punishments. Her jury had not been unanimous. The court sent her back for a new sentencing. On August 23, 2023, the new jury voted 10-2 for life with no release. She received that sentence. She now remains in a Florida facility with no chance of release. Her long sentence means she will stay locked away. Now what happens when jealousy over one boy spirals out of control among teens? Rachel Wade grew up in Pinellas Park, Florida. Her parents, Barry and Janet, worked steady jobs to keep the family afloat. She had a brother, spent summers in their backyard pool, and once called herself independent chic on social media. She left school in 10th grade, but later earned her GED. At 18, she landed a job at Applebee's and moved into her first apartment. On the surface, life looked steady. A few blocks away lived Sarah Ludman. Her parents, Gay and Charlie, were protective and hands-on. Her mother, a surgical nurse. Her father, a cab driver. Sarah was focused, driven. Straight A's, karate classes, scout meetings, dreams of becoming a vet. She was their sidekick, always close by. Rachel and Sarah didn't cross paths until Josh Camacho. He was 19, had a child, and a complicated past with more than one girl. Rachel reconnected with him shortly after moving out. Sarah met him while working at Chick-fil-A. Before long, both girls were in deep, and only one of them would survive it. The rivalry grew quickly. The girls sang mocking karaoke songs at Rachel's place. They heckled her while she worked. They left angry messages and harsh texts. Experts say that when teen feuds turn personal, they can spiral out of control. In this case, the threats became very real. Rachel even left a message that said, "I'm going to end you." On April 14, 2009, Rachel waited in her apartment. She felt fear and jealousy. Then she heard a car horn. She knew Sarah was nearby. Rachel called her ex-boyfriend Javier and grabbed a steak tool from the kitchen. That same night, Sarah went to Josh's house. After midnight, she drove friends to a McDonald's run. Someone warned her that Rachel might be close. Sarah drove to Javier's house and stopped her van right outside. She got out with her fists raised. Witnesses saw Rachel step forward calmly. She wounded Sarah in the shoulder. Then the blade went deeper, reaching her chest. Rachel later said Sarah had lunged at her first, but others disagreed. Sarah stumbled back into her van, her chest injured heavily. She dialed Josh and said, "It hurts." She collapsed behind the wheel. Paramedics rushed her to Northside Hospital, where she later passed away. Rachel threw the bent object onto a neighbor's roof and said, "I'm done." In July 2010, the trial began. The state said Rachel let jealousy drive her to look for Sarah that night. The recorded messages Rachel left were played in court. Witnesses, including Josh, his sister, and a friend, testified that Rachel walked up to the van and injured Sarah before anyone physically challenged her. Rachel's lawyer pointed to Florida's Stand Your Ground law. He argued that Rachel panicked when Sarah confronted her at work. He told the jury she acted in self-defense, but critics asked how that fit, since Rachel had grabbed a sharp object and followed Sarah. Less than 3 hours after closing arguments, the jury reached a decision on July 23, 2010. They found Rachel guilty of causing a fatal harm without premeditation. She cried when the verdict was read. On September 3, 2010, Judge Joseph Ballone sentenced her to 27 years behind bars. He noted the force needed to reach Sarah's heart showed clear intent. Rachel stood quietly, her head bowed. Her family held each other in the gallery. Sarah's parents sat across from them, grieving. The judge said, "The actions of Rachel Wade have caused a lot of pain. I hope now healing can occur." Rachel appealed her conviction. She argued self-defense and blamed social media for fueling the feud. In February 2012, her appeal was denied. In 2011, she had told ABC News that online platforms had allowed the hostility to grow unseen. As of 2023, Rachel is serving her sentence at the Lowell Correctional Institution Annex in Ocala, Florida. She will be eligible for release in March 2032 when she turns 42. Ana Maria Cardona once lived comfortably in Miami. She was married to Fidel Figueroa, a man deeply involved in illegal substance dealing. In September 1987, just 2 days after their son Lazaro was born, Fidel was found lifeless. Ana was left behind, 3 children, no income, and no safety net. Within 10 months, the money was gone. She started a relationship with Olivia Gonzalez. Together, they bounced between rundown motels, dragging the children with them. Life grew unstable. Ana had 3 kids. Lazaro, still a baby, a daughter, barely 2, a son, just 7. Her own past was already fractured. She didn't meet her father until she was 12, and when she told her parents what he did to her at 11, they didn't believe her. Her oldest son, Juan Puente, later ended up behind bars. He passed away in prison years later. But even before that, something in him had already broken. For more than a year, Lazaro suffered severe harm at the hands of Ana and Olivia. By age 3, he weighed only 18 pounds, about half the normal weight for a toddler. He had broken bones, head injuries, burns from cigarettes, bed sores, a broken front tooth, and signs of long-term malnutrition and dehydration. His arm had been twisted and tied to a mattress. His diaper was taped so he would soil himself. Bruises covered his body. Doctors testified that his wounds showed he tried to protect himself, and that he had brain injuries from repeated harm and neglect. On October 31, 1990, Ana hit Lazaro with a baseball bat, causing a serious head injury. The next day, they left his thin body under some bushes on Miami Beach. He was still wearing a t-shirt with a lollipop design, which led officers to call him Baby Lollipops. On January 11, 1991, Ana was formally charged with first-degree wrongdoing and severe child mistreatment. Her defense said, Olivia was mainly responsible for the harm. They also said Anna was using white powder to cope. Prosecutors showed strong evidence of long-term mistreatment. Olivia admitted in court that Anna had swung the bat. A jury found Anna guilty. The judge called the case the worst in the county's history and gave Anna the highest possible penalty. She was the first woman in Florida to receive that penalty. Anna spent nearly 17 years under that sentence before the Florida Supreme Court said the prosecutors had used unfair tactics at her trial. A new jury again found her guilty and again imposed the highest penalty. But that verdict was also overturned on appeal because of errors in how the punishment was decided. This time, the state chose not to seek the highest penalty. Neighbors said they heard Lazaro crying and water running while Anna kept him locked alone. In court, Anna spoke directly to the judge. "I didn't cause my son's passing. I did not harm my son. I did not mistreat my son. You don't believe me. Maybe you don't feel my pain. Nobody can love my son more than I do." A third jury found her guilty of the most serious wrongdoing and severe child mistreatment. Judge Miguel de la O gave her a life sentence. He said, "There are wild beasts that show more care for their young than you showed Lazaro." Emmelia Cardona is now serving life in a Florida prison. Her two earlier highest penalty sentences were overturned. Olivia Gonzalez received a 40-year sentence, but was released after 14 years. At Anna's third sentencing, her final words were, "I didn't cause my son's passing. I did not harm my son. I did not mistreat my son." Now meet the woman whose good deeds hid a secret and fatal betrayal. Margaret Allen was born in 1966 in Titusville, Florida. She grew up in a neighborhood where substance use was common. Between ages 5 and 8, she sometimes stayed with her grandmother. Even so, she faced harsh treatment at home. She was hurt repeatedly and once needed a hospital stay after unwanted contact. As an adult, she had 3 children. 2 of her children later spent time behind bars themselves. Allen was known for helping people in her neighborhood. She often gave them a place to stay, food to eat, and money when they needed it. Her friend and neighbor, Wenda Wright, had known Allen since they were young. Wright helped out around Allen's house. She cleaned fish, styled hair, and tidied up. Allen paid her for these chores. This work built trust between them. On February 8, 2005, Wright went to Allen's home for her usual chores. Later that day, they ran some errands together. Wright told her partner, Johnny Dublin, she would be back that evening, but she never returned. Allen showed up at Dublin's house later that night. She was upset and had scratches on her face. She said Wright had taken her purse. The purse held $2,000 in disability payments meant for one of Allen's children. Dublin let Allen look through Wright's room. She found nothing. Allen even offered him $200 to tell her where the purse was. What happened next came out at trial, mostly through the testimony of Allen's nephew, Quentin Allen. He said that Allen went to Wright's home and convinced Wright to come back with her to search for the purse. Once there, Allen locked Wright inside the house and went through every room. Over several hours, Allen and others hurt Wright badly. In the end, Allen used a belt to cut off her air supply. Wright's body was buried in a shallow grave on Allen's property. Allen stood trial for first-degree homicide and unlawful detention. Indictments came in March 2005. The trial began on September 13, 2010. Dublin and Quentin both told the court what they had seen. Dublin described Wright's last known moments. Quentin explained how Wright was brought back, locked up, and harmed. The jury found Allen guilty on both charges. On May 19, 2011, the judge gave Allen the harshest penalty available under Florida law. He said she would pay with her life for what she did. She also received a life term for the unlawful detention charge. During the sentencing phase, jurors heard about her history of being hurt as a child, her brain injury, and her tough upbringing. But they decided that the way she treated Wright was more serious than those hardships. Allen appealed to the Florida Supreme Court. But in July 2013, the court upheld her conviction and penalty. After another woman on Florida's row passed in custody in November 2024, Allen was the only woman left awaiting her final sentence. She remained in that status until she passed away of natural causes on December 13, 2024, at age 58. As of mid-2025, Florida again has one woman awaiting her final sentence. The next case started with a missing purse and ended with one friend buried and the other behind bars. Tina Brown was born in 1970 in Pensacola, Florida. She grew up in a home where family members used illegal substances. She went through harmful treatment and unwanted touching. Her early years felt unstable. Those experiences left deep emotional scars. She carried those wounds into adulthood. In early 2010, Tina lived in a trailer on Detroit Avenue in Escambia County. Her teenage daughter, Brittany, lived next door. Their neighbors were Heather Lee and 19-year-old Adriana Zimmerman. The four had once been close. Over several months, things turned tense. Tina believed Adriana had slashed her tires. Adriana said Tina filed false reports about her parenting. The final straw came when Adriana used a stun device on Brittany after an argument. Trial notes suggest Tina had been planning payback. A few days after that incident, she invited Adriana over, claiming she wanted to make up. Adriana agreed. On the night of March 24th, Tina stunned her again. Then she tied Adriana's hands. She gagged her with a sock. Tina struck Adriana with a crowbar and hit her again with the stun device. Next, Tina, Brittany, and Heather forced Adriana into Tina's car trunk. They drove to a nearby forest. There they beat her more. They poured a flammable liquid over her. Then they set her on fire. Adriana suffered severe burns over most of her body. Despite her injuries, she managed to walk about a third of a mile. She reached a nearby home. She told emergency responders what had happened and named the 3 people who targeted her. Adriana passed away 16 days later on April 9, 2010. She endured intense pain until her last moment. Police arrived on the scene soon after. They found the stun device and the crowbar, both with red stains. They collected the sock, a pair of shoes, and a hairpiece at the fire site. They even found Adriana's DNA on the headrest of Tina's car. Using this evidence, authorities arrested Tina, Brittany, and Heather on April 9, 2010, the same day Adriana passed. Tina faced the most serious charges related to intentionally taking a life. Brittany and Heather faced similar charges at first. Brittany pleaded guilty. Because she was just 16 at the time, she received a life term with no chance of release. Heather pleaded guilty to a lesser charge in exchange for testifying against Tina. She was given a 25-year sentence. Tina's trial began on June 18, 2012. Prosecutors said she masterminded every step. They argued her anger over the stun device incident led to a deliberate plan. Tina's defense team told a different story. They described her long history of trauma, struggles with addiction, and mental health challenges. They argued the aggressiveness was a sudden outburst, not a cold calculation. After about an hour of deliberation, the jury found Tina guilty of first-degree intentionally ending a life on June 21, 2012. A few days later, they recommended the harshest possible penalty. On June 26th, Judge Gary Burgosh confirmed that choice. Tina began serving that sentence on September 28, 2012. Tina's lawyers immediately filed appeals. They said her original defense failed to show her traumatic past properly. They claimed juror bias and poor mental health support had affected the trial. The Florida Supreme Court denied relief in May and July 2014. The U.S. Supreme Court declined to take the case on December 8, 2014. In 2018, Tina filed another motion, citing new statements by Heather Lee. That was denied in April 2019. Another appeal in August 2020 failed. In May 2024, a motion based on fresh testimony was also rejected. Tina remains in a high-security section for inmates awaiting final resolution, with no date set for any change. Tina is now held at Lowell Correctional Institution Annex in Ocala. She stays in a single-person cell. She gets showers on a limited schedule. Guards check on her every hour. Her movements are tightly controlled. She has very few privileges. As of May 2025, she is the only woman in Florida serving the harshest possible sentence without any hope of release. In the next case, a thief ran, a mom chased, only one walked away. Antoinsa Lacavia Clark was born in 1988. Public records show she ran into legal trouble well before the Wynwood incident. In 2008, she faced charges for making, sharing, and having illegal substances. Later, she was placed on probation for white powder possession. She also paid fines for soft substance offenses. Beyond these records, nothing is publicly known about her family or childhood. Late on March the 30th, 2024, Clark and her friend Frederica Pickett Wilson were parked near Northeast 16th Street in Miami's Wynwood district. A teenager and 3 young children were with them. Suddenly, they saw someone going through their car. Clark had a blue backpack with rent money inside. When the person grabbed that backpack, Pickett Wilson chased after him and used pepper spray. He punched her in return. Clark ran to help. Clark recovered the backpack. She also saw a gun inside. That weapon was later said to be stolen. During the struggle, the person was shot 3 times, once in the upper left stomach area and once in the front of the left thigh. He collapsed right there. Emergency crews rushed him to Jackson Memorial Hospital. He passed away on April 24th from those wounds. In early April 2024, police arrested both Clark and Pickett Wilson. They were held without bond at Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center. Prosecutors charged them both with second-degree charges. Clark faced extra counts for having a gun as a convicted felon and for taking a gun without permission. At the arraignment, Miami-Dade Circuit Judge Zachary and James oversaw the hearing. The women said they acted to protect themselves and the children. They said they never knew a gun was in the backpack. Why did Clark fire her weapon? The police report says things escalated quickly. A break-in, a scuffle, a chase, pepper spray, and then the gun appeared. Clark later told detectives she felt her rent money and her family were at risk. Critics say the immediate danger ended once the backpack was back. They argue that using fatal force then was too much. Their case moved to a full hearing. The prosecution argued Clark, as a felon, should have known better than to handle a weapon and that she used more force than necessary. The defense stressed at self-defense and protecting others. They pointed to the physical harm Pickett Wilson suffered and the high-stress situation. On an undisclosed date, the court found Clark guilty of second-degree charges of ending a life, having a gun as a felon, and grand theft of a gun. Under Florida law, second-degree charges can carry a sentence of up to life in prison. The extra gun charge adds more time. The judge sentenced Clark to a term behind bars, though the exact length wasn't made public. Pickett Wilson received a similar outcome, but with a shorter sentence since her role was smaller. Up next is a woman, a gun, and a pregnancy behind bars. Before we move on to the next case, consider subscribing. Daisy Link is a young woman who faces a second-degree homicide charge in Florida. Records show she entered the Turner Guilford Night Correctional Center on June 25, 2022. Authorities say she shot her boyfriend in the leg. That gunshot proved fatal. Daisy had claimed she acted in self-defense, yet the case moved forward as a homicide charge. Reports say she held the weapon and fired it during a dispute. By mid-2025, she is still in custody. She waits for her trial. Her lawyer argues she acted to protect herself. They mention past harm from her boyfriend. The court has not yet reviewed that claim. Only a few details exist about Daisy's background. No birth date or hometown is listed. Nothing is known about her childhood. During her pregnancy, she spoke with her mother and sister. They only shared concern about her condition in custody. On June 25, 2022, officers arrested Daisy under a second-degree homicide charge. They say she shot her boyfriend. Cameras show her walking away after the incident. A witness is heard saying, "You'll be fine." No records mention earlier disputes or court orders. In early 2024, Daisy told her mother in a Christmas call that she was pregnant. She was in a locked, high-security unit at the time. That raised questions about how it could happen. Investigators later found that Daisy and another inmate, Joan DePaz, never met in person. They used shared vents in the unit to talk. They passed notes and pictures. They even created a way to move semen from Joan's cell to Daisy's. They used a string of bedding sealed in plastic wrap. Then they used a modified applicator to transfer it. Daisy explained that Joan rolled the sample into a small tube and tied it to the string. She pulled it through the vent. Then she placed it inside the applicator and used it. Joan said they made up to 5 attempts every day for a month. Against all odds, Daisy became pregnant. They took this risk because isolation took a toll. Daisy said, "Being alone, you spend hours talking. It feels like you are together." Joan said he always wished for a child and picked Daisy. They called the pregnancy a miracle. They even compared it to a story of a virgin birth. Did the pregnancy relate to her shooting case? No. It has no link to the homicide charge. It does show how desperate they felt. It highlights their need for connection during confinement. They found that link in the baby they conceived. As of July 2025, Daisy still has no trial date. Joan DePaz admitted guilt to a first-degree homicide charge. He received a 25-year term. Daisy remains at Turner Guilford Night awaiting a jury trial. No court documents from either side have appeared yet. Daisy has not faced trial. She has not been found guilty or given a sentence. Her case is still pending. Up next is a burn comforter, fake pregnancy photos, and 2 handwritten notes. Patricia Thompson was born in 1966. She worked as a public service aide with the Miami Police Department. She had a daughter who later asked for leniency for her mother. Thompson began dating Carl Ronald Patrick. Patrick had served 25 years with the Miami Police Department. Their relationship took an unexpected turn when Thompson said she was pregnant. That pregnancy turned out to be false. During the trial, people heard rumors that she even faked ultrasound pictures. What made her create this illusion? In May 2014, tensions rose between Thompson and Patrick. He found out she lied about being pregnant. He also saw thousands of dollars charged on his credit cards. Prosecutors say this moment marked a turning point. On the morning of May 7th, 2014, in their Pembroke Pines home, Thompson shot Patrick once in the arm or shoulder. The wound was not instantly fatal. Medical experts said he could have survived if he got prompt medical help. Instead, Thompson wrapped him in a comforter that had burn marks. She took his cell phone so he could not call for help. Then she left him until he passed away. She removed her red-stained clothes and put them in Patrick's BMW. She drove to a storage facility. There, she dropped off baby items and clothing. Investigators later found 2 handwritten notes. One said, "It was an accident. We had a fight." The other apologized and explained she was too afraid to call for help. She also mentioned money left to a niece. When Patrick did not show up for work, his supervisors tried to reach him. Thompson answered each call. She said he was fine. She even hung up when someone asked to speak with him. Inside their home, officers found Patrick's body. He was wrapped in the burnt comforter. Red stains marked the door frames. His uniformed body lay slumped against a wall. The autopsy showed the single gunshot wound could have been survivable. It also suggested he was shot at close range while lying on his back. Combined with the phone calls and the timeline of her actions, the evidence pointed to Thompson. Authorities arrested her on May 28, 2014, and charged her with second-degree homicide. At her trial in August 2016, Thompson claimed self-defense. She said Patrick had mistreated her. She told the jury she grabbed his gun during a struggle. She described how he pulled the gun on her and she shot him to protect herself. Prosecutors disagreed. They pointed to her detailed plan. She staged the scene to look like an accident. She moved his body. She wrote 2 notes. She hid his phone. She faked a pregnancy. They said these actions showed intent, not fear. They stressed she stopped him from getting help while he was still alive. Did Thompson truly believe she was in danger? Or did she panic after her lies unraveled? The jury decided her actions crossed the line into homicide. On August the 26th, 2016, they found her guilty of second-degree homicide. At her sentencing on November 4th, 2016, the courtroom was tense. Judge Jeffrey Cohen told her she would spend the rest of her life behind bars. Thompson appeared calm. Detectives and witnesses embraced. Family members wept. Patrick's mother, Lucille, spoke after the sentence. She said, "My Lord has given justice today, because my son was good to that lady." Prosecutors had described Patrick as a devoted officer. They said he had a wife and children who loved him. They added, he loved her so much he didn't see the ugly in her. Before the judge delivered the sentence, Thompson spoke directly to Patrick's mother. She said, "I am sorry in my own self-defense that Carl lost his life, Miss Patrick. I truly loved Carl, but I didn't mean for him to pass away. I'm sorry. I'm sorry you lost him." These were her last public words. They mixed apology, regret, and her self-defense claim. Thompson received life in prison without any chance of parole. She is now held at a state women's facility in Florida. The next woman used her past as a repo agent to plan something no one saw coming. Sheila Keen was born around 1963. No exact birth date has ever been reported. She grew up in Florida. Later, she worked as a repo agent at Bargain Motors in Wellington. That used car shop was run by Marlene and Michael Warren. At work, Keen earned a reputation for toughness. A co-worker said she carried a gun for protection. By 1990, she was said to have begun an affair with Michael Warren, Marlene's husband. Both of them denied it at the time. Records later showed they married in 2002. After that, they moved to Virginia and opened a restaurant under a new name. On the morning of May 26, 1990, Marlene Warren was at home in Wellington, Florida. She was having breakfast with her son Joe and some friends. A person dressed as a clown came to the door. They carried flowers and 2 balloons, one saying, "You're the greatest." Marlene smiled and said, "Oh, how pretty." Then the clown pulled out a gun and shot her in the face at point-blank range. The person walked back calmly to a waiting white Chrysler LeBaron and drove away. Marlene survived in the hospital for 2 days before passing away. Why use a clown disguise? Investigators say it was meant to lower her guard. A friendly mask hid a fatal plan. At first, it seemed random. Then some Bargain Motors employees spoke up. They remembered a bubbly woman about 5'10", with brown hair and eyes. She had come in just before the shooting to buy a costume, a wig, makeup, and a red nose. A few days later, police found the abandoned Chrysler LeBaron. Inside, they spotted orange fibers from a clown wig and 1 strand of brown human hair. Meanwhile, Keen was living in Virginia under the name Debbie Warren alongside Michael. In 2017, a cold case unit used new DNA methods on that hair sample. On September 26, 2017, they arrested Keen. She was charged with a first-degree offense related to the shooting. Why wasn't Michael charged? He was with friends driving to a racetrack at the time. Prosecutors said they found no direct proof linking him to the shooting. Keen Warren's defense faced hurdles of its own. Some evidence had been stored incorrectly. Key witness statements vanished. The file on that clown sighting was missing. Her lawyers argued that any mix-ups could explain the hair and fiber matches. 2 weeks before trial in April 2023, she agreed to a plea deal. She pleaded guilty to a second-degree offense related to the shooting. The deal called for a 12-year sentence. By then, she had already spent 2,039 days in custody. Under Florida's rules and with credits for good behavior, she was set to serve less than 2 more years. At her plea hearing, the judge reviewed the facts. He described her as the clown who shot Marlene. When asked if she agreed, she quietly replied, yes. Sheila Keen Warren was released on November 2, 2024. She had served about 18 months in prison, including time counted from before her trial and credits for good behavior. Marlene's son, Joe Aarons, had watched the shooting happen. He faced Keen Warren in court by video. He said he never saw any remorse in her. At the hearing, he told the court he felt relief that the truth had finally come out, though many still felt the sentence was too light. The next woman was 8 months pregnant when the plan was set in motion. Emmelia Lily Carr was born around 1989 or 1990 in Ocala, Florida. She grew up in a family neighbors called close-knit but troubled. She finished high school, joined the ROTC program, did some modeling, and studied massage therapy. Her family, friends, and court records say she suffered inappropriate behavior as a child by her father and grandfather. She carried that pain into her adult life. By her mid-20s, Carr had 3 young children. In early 2009, she began a rocky relationship with Joshua Fulgham. He was married to someone else at the time, and he was also the father of Carr's unborn baby. When Carr was 8 months pregnant, everything came to a tragic head. On February 15, 2009, 26-year-old Heather Strong vanished near the Interstate 75 corridor in Reddick, Marion County. She worked at an iron skillet restaurant there. Over a month later, on March 19th, her body was found in a shallow grave close to Boardman, Florida. Investigators concluded she had been tied to a chair inside a storage trailer on Carr's family property. Prosecutors said Carr and Fulgham had planned to trick Strong with a story about hidden money. When Strong went into the trailer, Carr bound her to a computer chair with duct tape. Then Carr put a plastic bag over Strong's head and held it tight until Strong could no longer breathe. Earlier, Carr had tried to break Strong's neck but had not succeeded. Fulgham helped with the binding and took off Strong's shoes. The state argued that jealousy drove Carr. They said she feared Strong would take Fulgham and the unborn baby away from her. Carr's own words, recorded by investigators, showed she spoke of planning the act and even offered money to anyone who would help end Strong's life. Carr was arrested on March 24, 2009. She gave 10 interviews without a lawyer present. In one recording, she said Fulgham had asked her to try to snap her neck, which she admitted she had only partially done. Her trial began on November 29, 2010. Prosecutors pointed to the planning, the tape, the bag, and the burial. They told the jury this was not a sudden act of rage, but a deliberate plan. Carr's defense spoke about her childhood trauma, her difficult family history, and her pregnancy to ask for leniency. On December 7, 2010, the jury found Carr guilty of first-degree homicide and unlawful restraint. 3 days later, by a slim 7-5 vote, they recommended she face the harshest possible punishment. On February 22, 2011, the judge sentenced her to face capital punishment by injection. In 2015, the Florida Supreme Court upheld both her conviction and her sentence. But on May 19, 2017, her sentence was changed to life without any chance of release. Today, Carr remains at Lowell Correctional Institution, where she continues to serve her sentence. The next woman had the lifestyle, the mansion, the private jet. But when the marriage soured, so did the story. Joyce Lamellin was born in 1950. She arrived in Miami as a young secretary. She had a son from a previous marriage. In 1974, she met Stanley Allen Cohen. He was 38 then. He had a degree in civil engineering and had become a wealthy developer. They married that year. Stanley adopted Joyce's son. Together, they built a high-flying lifestyle. They owned homes in Coconut Grove and Colorado. They even had a private jet. They mixed with celebrities and used illegal substances. By the 1980s, their marriage was under strain. Joyce said they had not been close for 2 years. She also accused Stanley of fathering a child with another woman. Just before March 7, 1986, there were rumors. People said Stanley spent late nights drinking and using white powder with country star Tanya Tucker. Suspicion grew darker than simple infidelity. On the night of March 6th, 1986, Stanley Cohen was shot in the upstairs bedroom of their Bluff-top home. 4 bullets struck his head and he lost his life in bed. Investigators found the home's security system had been turned off. Their Doberman guard did not bark. These signs suggested the person inside was known to the family. No one was arrested right away. 2 years later, Frank Zuccarello, a 25-year-old offender held for burglary, came forward. He told police he and 2 other men had been hired to shoot Stanley. He said Joyce had offered $100,000. He said she showed them the house layout, turned off the alarm, and let them in. Zuccarello gave this testimony hoping for a lighter sentence. Police used his story in court. They said Joyce had planned every detail. She mapped the home, cut the security, and guided the shooters inside. Were his claims true, or was his account driven by a deal? Those questions echoed in courtroom records and whispered rumors. Joyce was arrested in October 1988. Her trial began on October 10, 1989. It ended a few weeks later. Prosecutors described her as a socialite who hired hitmen and planned every step. Jury members heard about the home map, the disarmed alarm, the matched gun, and Zuccarello's damning testimony. Joyce insisted she was innocent. She even passed a lie detector test. She said many strangers could have entered. The defense argued Zuccarello had been coached, rewarded, and had failed lie detector tests. But after just 8 hours of deliberation, the jury found her guilty of first-degree homicide, planning the act, and using a firearm. In November 1989, the judge sentenced her to life in prison, the maximum allowed under Florida law. Joyce offered no visible reaction when the ruling landed. Outside the courtroom, her attorney admitted he still wasn't sure if she had really done it. Prosecutors argued that Joyce feared a divorce would strip her of wealth and status. Could that fear be enough motive? Even with motive framed, another question hovered. Was Zuccarello telling the truth, or was his testimony shaped by investigators? Those doubts resurfaced in 1993. A Miami TV reporter recorded retired Detective John Spear off camera. He said he believed Joyce had shot her husband herself and that the hired men were never there. He hinted Zuccarello's story was manufactured. Despite this, the state refused to reopen the case. Joyce's appeals failed repeatedly. Most recently in 2025, officials maintain that the physical evidence alone supports her conviction, even without Zuccarello's account. In interviews from prison, Joyce has expressed deep despair. She reportedly told investigators, "In an instant, I really wish I had passed too." She added, "It would have been easier than living." Joyce Cohen is now 75. She remains at Homestead, serving her life term. Now, did a 16-year-old really mastermind her father's end? Or was she just trying to protect someone else? Courtney Christine Schulhof was born in 1987 in Washington, D.C. She grew up in Altamonte Springs, Florida. Her parents separated when she was a teenager, and her father, Stephen, moved out after money troubles. Courtney left home to live with him in his apartment. In high school, she quit classes and began working toward her GED. She met Michael Morin, who was 5 years older and had a past record for taking cars without permission. Her father disapproved of their relationship. Courtney later said her father had hit her. On the night of February 9, 2004, Courtney and Michael went to a movie. Afterwards, they returned to Stephen's apartment. Michael said Courtney urged him to use a baseball bat on her father. She handed him the bat after a disagreement in which she said Stephen had struck her. At first, Courtney said she was outside walking the dog when the incident happened. She claimed she came back to find Michael covered in red. In a later statement, she admitted waiting on the apartment's tennis court and placing the bat where Michael could see it. The next morning, Stephen's girlfriend, Elaine Book, could not reach him and grew worried. She went to the apartment and saw Courtney and Michael running away. She called 911. Police arrived and found Stephen's body in the bedroom. Officers arrested Courtney and Michael on February 11, 2004. Courtney's trial opened on September 26, 2006. Prosecutors said Michael only acted because Courtney set the scene, pointing out that she left the bat in plain view. She chose not to speak in her own defense. On September 27th, the jury found her guilty of first-degree charges in her father's passing. Because she was 16, she did not face the harshest youth sentence. Instead, she received life in prison without any chance of release. At her sentencing, she spoke directly to the judge. "Your Honor, I admit in court that Michael Morin is not the person who ended my father's life. I take full responsibility and I accept the verdict." In April 2007, Michael went on trial. He faced the maximum adult sentence. He admitted to the beating and showed remorse. Courtney testified again on his behalf, repeating that she took responsibility. On April 26, the jury found him guilty, and he too received life in prison without release. In 2012, the U.S. Supreme Court ruled that life without the possibility of release for anyone under 18 was unconstitutional. That decision led to a review of Courtney's sentence. In March of 2017, a judge reduced it to 40 years. As of 2025, she remains held at Lowell Correctional Institution in Florida, and she has not yet had an early review of her case. The next woman said her children were mouthy. Her journal told a darker story. Julie Powers Shenker was born in 1961 in Muscatine, Iowa. She grew up in a family connected to the military. As an adult, she joined the U.S. Army. There, she worked as a Russian language specialist. While stationed in Germany, she met Colonel Parker Shenker. They married and had 2 children. Calyx arrived in 1994. Beau followed in 1997. The family later settled in Tampa, Florida, where Parker served at MacDill Air Force Base. On January 27, 2011, something tragic happened at their home. Julie used a .38 caliber revolver against her 2 teenage children. Beau, who was 13, was shot twice in the head while riding in the family SUV. Calyx, who was 16, was in her bedroom. She was sitting at her computer when she was struck by a gunshot to the face. Afterward, Julie tried to harm herself. She went out to the back porch and fell asleep. Early the next morning, neighbors found her unconscious and covered in red. Police arrived soon after and discovered that Beau and Calyx had been fatally wounded. During questioning, Julie said she acted because her children were mouthy and showed disrespect. Investigators learned she had planned the act for several days. Her personal journal even mentioned a Saturday massacre. She bought the revolver in advance, but a 3-day waiting rule delayed her. When the waiting period ended, she carried out her plan on January 27, 2011. Julie faced 2 first-degree homicide charges for taking the lives of her children. At trial, her defense said she was struggling with bipolar disorder and depression. They argued these conditions harmed her decision-making. The prosecution pointed to Julie's own journal notes. They also noted the firearm purchase and her detailed planning. After under 2 hours of jury talk, she was found guilty on both counts. On May 15, 2014, Julie received 2 back-to-back life sentences in prison without any chance of release.